Hello, I'm Shelby with Empowerabilities, and we're here with Stan Whitehurst, the Webster County Clerk. So welcome to our interview. We're so excited to talk to you today. We are celebrating Disability Voting Rights Week in Missouri. We were actually at the Capitol yesterday with the Secretary of State, and he signed a proclamation claiming this week in Missouri for the second year, celebrating people with disabilities in the voting process. And it was mentioned at that time how important clerks are, and we love our clerks and we want to build those relationships. We serve 8 counties and Webster is one of them. So we were excited to come here today and just ask a few questions and kind of start that relationship where we can help you help the voters in your area. I did look up some statistics because I always think that's interesting, and there are 40.2 million voters in the US with a disability, and that's just people who actually say they have a disability. So we know there are probably more with the aging process and just people that maybe aren't seeking services or don't identify as that yet. And then in Webster County, there are actually 14.7%, which is a little bit higher than the national average. And 10% of those are over 18. So I just thought that was interesting because that would be the voting age. So as we're working in our communities trying to educate voters on how they can vote, I just think it's important to help you understand, what we're hearing, and then also how we can help you. So we have some questions.
You bet.
If you don't mind. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and
Sure.
just who you are?
Thank you. Well, I'm a Webster County native. I've been married to my wife Julie for about 32 years. We have one daughter. She's 22, just recently married, so we're entering a new phase of life.
Yeah.
But I've been doing this particular job I'm in the middle of my 7th term, 4-year term. So was elected the first time in 1998, which sounds like a long time ago when you hear it out loud, but I love the job, been doing it for these many years, hope to keep doing it as long as I can.
And you actually have to run for office, right? You're
Correct.
On the ballot yourself.
And actually I'll be filing next year, again for another 4-year term, and it is a little strange to be running an election and also be on the ballot, but we make it work.
Yeah, I just don't know that a lot of people know that this is actually an elected position. So what about your role that you play and what a day in the life of a clerk might look like? If you could just share
Sure.
your favorite parts maybe.
I think it's different county to county. Webster has about 40,000 people in it. We're one of the larger small counties, if that makes sense. And so the clerk's office is kind of a hybrid. We do lots of things. So elections is just one piece of the pie.
Okay.
So most of the time, we're dealing with HR issues and paying bills and doing grant administration or working with the road department or just a wide range of different things. But then in the even numbered years in particular, periodically these election events pop up and that becomes a very dominant feature. So basically we run the election piece from start to finish, registering voters, recruiting election judges, programming equipment, counting the votes, and releasing results.
So that's a big job, it sounds like.
It's a big job, and county clerk is a fairly generic title, but I really think it's interesting. Every day is a little bit different. Anytime you're dealing with the public, there's going to be a lot of variety from one day to the next, but the elections is probably the most fun.
We actually just became a polling place last year, so at our office we are more familiar now than ever than we were before with how that whole process works. So we know all the steps it takes and how serious it is because those ballots are very important to secure.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know that's a big role to play just in keeping those.
High degree of scrutiny, and more so in recent years, which is fine.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Why do you think it's important for people to register and then to vote? We also register people to vote, so we know it's important, but do you have any thought on that?
Sure, I'd say there's 3 different reasons. One, it's your opportunity to express yourself. And then also it's your opportunity to preserve your right to gripe, right? You shouldn't gripe if you didn't vote. But also I think that civic duty piece, it's a way of kind of showing gratitude. You're part of a society where people have paid really high prices to preserve this right, and it just shows respect if you exercise that right.
Yeah, I agree. So what do you see as the number one barrier that keeps people from voting? Like from your perspective, I guess, just even in Webster County.
It's more of an emotional thing, I think. I think people get frustrated sometimes, and they feel like their voice doesn't matter, and they just voluntarily drop out of the pool. I don't know that physical barriers or difficulties in getting registered are inordinately high. I think a lot of what keeps people away from voting is sometimes just frustration, or they feel like their voice doesn't count.
And I know this year's a little different too, because it was confusing as to when there is an election, which I believe there is November, right? There will be an election.
There's an opportunity for a special election in an odd numbered year. You'll always have an April, because that's when your local jurisdictions have their board seats. Okay. So schools and cities and fire districts, that type of thing. So that happens every April, whether it's an odd numbered or even numbered year. In an odd numbered year, the August and November slots are reserved, so if someone calls an election for like a tax question or something like that, then that's when those would take place. In Webster County, no one did, so we didn't have an August, and we're not going to have a November.
Okay.
Now, in an even numbered year, you're going to have April, and then you'll have a primary in August and the general election in November. So this year it was relatively quiet on the election front for us. Next year will not be, and it'll be wild and woolly.
Yeah, it'll be back to the even year. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that too, because I think that is part of it, just kind of keeping, especially for people that aren't registered, because there are deadlines that we have to kind of keep track of, and people have to meet that deadline to be able to vote. So how do you, or what can we do? This really wasn't on your question list, so I'm kind of throwing this one at you. How can we help you remove those barriers if people face a barrier? Would you encourage people to call their local county clerk if they have an issue, report that directly?
Absolutely.
Do you talk to a lot of people about things?
Sure. Actually, we field a lot of calls when it's close to election time. So I'd say, as far as what you can do, I think would be really helpful to let people know that the door is open, that we're not intimidating, that we want to help. We may not always know how right off the bat, there are things that we can do to get better, but we sincerely want people to participate, and we welcome questions. As a matter of fact, let's say if you're in Webster County, our phone number is 859-VOTE, 859-8683. If you have questions or concerns about accessibility or process, just give us a buzz.
Okay, so that's really good for people to know. So where can people register to vote in Webster County? I'm assuming here at the courthouse.
There's lots of options. Most people, of course, register at the License Bureau.
Okay.
But you can come into the courthouse, any city hall, any library, the health department, health unit, or family services. So most government offices. If that's too many options and I've confused you, again, just give us a call. And
that might be a potential register.
I'll take the call if you call next time. I promise. But just give us a buzz and we'll get worked out. Also, you can register to vote online also.
Okay, that's right, and that's through the state, and then it would kind of go through that whole process and come back to you.
Right. The voter registration site is actually administered by the state, but then they would send us the copies electronically, and we can take care of it that way. So there's lots of options.
Okay, and then just so you know, Empowerabilities and Jen being here as the outreach person could always help people or direct them to you as well. So
that's great.
Okay, so how does your office ensure voters with a disability have access to voting? So we've kind of talked about how to register, where to register, but if someone has a disability, what things do you have in place that would help them have access to that?
I think the first thing is we try to select polling place sites that are generally accessible. That's not always
Yeah.
Sometimes that's difficult because you're trying to cover a geographic area where there may not be a school district or a government building that has, strict accessibility. But we try generally to take that into account when we select a polling place. The other thing is you can vote absentee or early voting now, and so we offer those services. We have accessible equipment that can be sent out, and actually we have that here at the courthouse and also in the polling places on the major elections. Again, help people with vision impairments or sometimes other types of barriers.
And then also, I forgot my question, but I'm so glad that you're focusing on the accessibility for people that really want to get out and vote in person.
And it is kind of difficult sometimes to find. You're asking these owners of these buildings to be a guest for a couple of days.
Right.
And we really value the participation and partnership with those folks. I mean, it's mainly fire districts, churches, those types of things. But they're a really necessary piece of the puzzle.
I guess what I was going to ask was the early voting. So that's 2 weeks in Missouri. Is that correct?
Yeah. Now
Okay.
I'm gonna try to not. You may have to edit this out to make it.
I just remember that question came up yesterday because I know some states it's different, and so.
In Missouri, we have a 6-week period that you can absentee vote prior to every election.
Okay.
And then the last 2 of those 6 weeks, you do not have to provide a reason.
Okay.
So you can just show up anytime at your central place. In Webster County, it's the courthouse. And that last 2 weeks, you don't have to explain why. You can just cast your ballot then. But during that full 6 weeks, disability is a valid reason for voting. So you can vote by mail during that 6-week time. You can come into the courthouse and vote, a full 6 weeks prior to.
Okay.
But we kind of slang say early voting is the 2 weeks prior, but
Okay.
really it's
The full 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
wider than that.
Okay. Well, that is good to know because I think that's something new that people didn't, maybe realize. So how do you help prepare election judges, or if you call them poll workers? I know there are some interchangeable words to assist those with a disability.
Well, mainly by showing them the equipment, and then we do a training session prior to every election,
Oh, good.
where we actually try to have a series of short lessons with smaller numbers of judges at a time, because a big classroom setting doesn't always communicate the way we'd like. And that's always a piece of the puzzle to talk about, how just to treat everyone with respect, which people who are working as election judges, they're doing it because they have the right reasons. I mean, they want to help.
It's not a high-paying job.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of preaching to the choir there, but we do remind them, and then we train them on that equipment. And the assistive equipment is a little unfamiliar, and sometimes it's intimidating to the election judges, and they're almost a little afraid of it.
Yeah.
So we try to break down that fear factor and make them more comfortable.
Ahead of time. That's good. Yeah. So I guess the next question might be, do you need more judges and poll workers?
We always, recruiting poll workers or election judges statewide is a kind of a perennial problem because it is a long day, and you have to find people who are available during the day. Then you have to have an equal partisan balance.
That's
So
right.
you need to find people who generally say they're on the Democrat side, people who generally say they're on the Republican side. It's not a card-carrying phenomenon.
Right.
They're just people who affiliate.
Yeah.
We make them go through the training and these different things. So it's always kind of a strain a bit to get the recruiting piece done. But actually in Webster County, we are really fortunate. Historically, we have more people who want to work than we have slots a lot of times.
Oh, wow. That's a good problem.
Which is a really good problem to have. And so we keep lists of people who are willing to serve. Obviously, April elections are a lower turnout. We don't use as many. Then when you get to a November, like a big presidential, it's just about everybody gets a call then. So.
Okay. Well, they would just contact your office if they were
Yes, they
interested.
can contact our office.
Okay.
They can, the Secretary of State has a website they can register through. They can contact their local party committee if they want to and let it be known.
Okay.
It's probably more efficient just to reach out to us
Reach out
directly.
to you. Okay. Well, that's great for anyone that wants to do that. And I think too, it might be good for people who have a disability that might be able to be an
Yes.
election judge, just to be a part of that process and to kind of help give feedback if there are areas,
Agreed.
Yeah. So the next question would be, how many polling places do you have in Webster County?
Okay, well,
Do you
there's
know?
a central polling place, and then we actually reduced down this last cycle. We're down to 11 plus the courthouse.
Okay.
Total of 12.
Yeah. But that's probably spread out over a large area, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we encompass, Seymour, Rogersville, Marshfield, Niagara, some of Stratford, Fairgrove areas, so geographically it's a wide range, and again, 40,000 population, probably about 22,000 registered voters, active registered voters. And so, that some of those polling places have a considerable number. I think the Rogersville polling place is our largest, maybe a little over 3,500 potential voters there. Then you have some rural areas where you're dealing more with like 700 or 800, because you don't want people to have to drive too far.
Right. That's probably the biggest challenge is just, finding local places. I don't know if I accompanied you, but we, as Empowerabilities, went along with some of the clerks to some of the polling places. And I remember in Polk County, and there was literally a woman's home that she had offered up as a polling place. And I think her deep freeze was, one of the places where people actually voted. So it was interesting because she just said that it was a struggle sometimes to find places that were close enough where people wouldn't have to drive, long distance. So that was very eye-opening to see, just knowing that in rural areas you might have extra challenges than in the cities.
I don't want to go too far off track, and maybe you have a good editor and pare this down. But when I first came in, we were using 22 polling places in the larger elections, and we had some private residences that we were using in the rural areas and whatever. And we really tried to narrow this down and based upon the accessibility piece. But there is a balance to strike. If it's too far a drive, you're losing people in participation that way.
Right.
But if the places if you don't have good parking, if you don't have good entrances, then you're creating a new bar that way.
Right. That's a good point to bring up. So let's just real quick, what's the next election? You said November. But
for some counties, there'll be an election in November.
Okay.
For us, it won't be until April 7th of 26.
Okay.
And for any election, you need to register 4 weeks prior.
4 weeks prior. Okay. So for the next election, if you live in Webster County, you would need to register in March.
March 11th.
March 11th. Okay. And then, is there anything else you would like to share? We really appreciate all the insight you've given us today, just to help our voters and us as people who are out there assisting people understand. But is there anything else you feel is important for voters to know?
Again, people who work in this field, that are true believers in democracy for the most part, right? They really, we are not trying to find ways of knocking people out. We want people to participate, but there are rules we have to follow, in terms of registration and ID and that type of thing. And I think the biggest way to make sure things work is just to communicate. If you have questions, let us know. If there are barriers we're not aware of, give us a call. Let us work on those things.
And don't wait till the last minute. Do it as soon as you know. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing, and we're so excited to continue this relationship, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Well, thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.